Hi, everyone. Officially, welcome and good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Thank you so much for joining us virtually today. My name is Hayla Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's live author reading of new popular fiction. We're going to be hearing from M.A. Arana, author of Wing Rebel, book 3 of the Wing series, released this past July 8th. Brian Snyder, author of Death Valley, a novel released on July 22nd, and Phyllis Picasso, author of Unwrapped, which was released July 29th. All three authors' books can be purchased both from online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, you can find the books on Atmosphere Press's website as well. That's at atmospherepress.com/books. I'm also going to put links to each book directly in the chat for you all, so you can easily access them that way. At the end of today's event, we are going to have time for audience questions. So during the readings, if you think of a question for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. Please do stay muted for the duration of the event, but you can always use the chat for praise and comments in addition to your question. One last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to support all three of our authors. We're going to start off with our first reader, who is M.A. Arana. Maria is a writer, poet, and editor from the Los Angeles area. She has published many poems and short stories in various publications. Formerly a teacher who encouraged a love of reading and writing, she now channels that passion to create magical stories for a wider audience. She lives with her family, 4 dogs, and 1 cat who thinks she's a queen herself. Today, we're going to be hearing her read from her 3rd book in the Wing series. In this book, the battle between the winged Avens and the dark Gargans intensifies. Led by King Sibilla, the Avens are sworn to protect Earth, but their kingdom is on the brink of destruction. Mabon's daughter possesses extraordinary powers, while his twin sons, Xander and Zio, must navigate a deadly path between magic, fate, and betrayal. Let's now welcome Maria.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us and listening to our stories today. Like Ayla said, I'm going to read from my 3rd book, Wing Rebel. And like she said, there's a battle going on, and Mabon Sabia has a lot going on and on his plate. So happened from the beginning all the way to now, he had to leave behind his wife and twin sons, and the Guardians took advantage of that. And the result was what happens in Wing Rebel. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with chapter 11, a section of it, and then I'm going to move on to chapter 13. So it begins, King Wakar said. His talons scraped the mirror before him, divulging his enemy's actions. King Mabon has led a sheltered life thus far with that human queen of his. He squinted his yellowed eyes and snorted. Little does he know the sword of old could kill an Avon easily with its blade. Yes, your most high. Tamesis bowed and smirked, recalling how the blade left the Avon king. The young prince will yield it once again and finish off what he started those years ago. Wakar turned to the witch and leaned back on his large throne. 2 horns decorated the top rail. You'd better be right, witch. Zayo gets stronger by the day. Haven't I been right so far? She moved away from the king's shadow and closer to the light near the mirror, her face distorted from the move. Ibis is growing stronger and age is weakening without the Avon's knowledge. Punching the chair's arm, King Wakar watched Tamesis recoil and lips twitch. I still don't have the human scum on my doorstep to complete the spell. Bowing again, Tamesis raised her eyes. How did you know? Wakar punches the chair again, and Tamesis gulped. Soon, my king, soon. Zio's sudden need to transform hit Mabon too. Sweat covered his body like an oil coating, and as Mabon rose from his knelt position, his arm throbbed. He held his arm in place. For some reason, the sword of old had left its impression inside him the day Zio cut him with it. His arm healed, but the impression burned through his soul. Could that be why the eye of Zorea burned too? Mabon caressed his chest where the tattooed eye marked his skin. His powers might not be up to par with such an impression, and he feared it would be his undoing if Ibis truly broke free of her ice cell. Your Highness, Camille called the king for the third time. Are you all right? Mabon turned to her, breathing a little less heavy, and answered, I'm fine, Camille. What of Zio? The prince is exhausted. She creased her brow as she washed her hands and King sigh in relief. His long hair in a fringe covered his brown eye, leaving the pale blue one standing out from his dark brown skin. We need to discuss what Seda gave you. At the moment, we need to get Zio to safety. But if I may be so bold, my king, Camille said with solemnity, if the Gargans plan to attack the princess, shouldn't they be by your side? Zio is in no state to fight another battle. He came too close to the change. Mabon looked at his son on the floor, sleeping peacefully at last. I'm sorry, Camille. She picked up her cloak and approached the king, closing the gap. She sensed his torment over his sons, the tension in his jaw, and the grief in his eyes. Will you not heed Seda's warning then? Mabon closed his eyes. Seda had mentioned a few days ago that Ibis would return and seek more than the throne. She may come after the eye of Zorea. I apologize, Your Highness, she bowed. No, Mabon placed his hand on her slender arm. Seda meant what she said. About the crystal? Xander asked before using his elevation powers to raise his brother, making Zio float. Sometimes, young prince, your ability to know is uncanny, Camille shook her head. Tori fears this gift of yours, and with due concern. Is that why my sister seeks counsel? There's a higher magic at work here. Xander stopped. He put his hand over Zio's forehead. It changed to white, almost glass, and both King and Camille marveled at the young prince's skill. I sense the dead isn't the dead anymore, Xander added. King Mabon stepped forward, removing his arm from Camille. What is it you speak of, Xander? First Seda riddles and now you? If I may, sire, Camille said, I believe he speaks of your ex-mate Ibis. She has surpassed death and walked upon the living ones. True enough, but even Ibis cannot return as something indestructible, Mabon asked, though deep down he believed such a thing could happen. He was connected to his sons through the eye, and from what Zio did with his sword, but would he doubt this? No, father, Xander said. We're saying she might already be here. Break. This is insane, Tori paced in front of the double steel doors, secured for her protection. Beside them were two elite female Avon guards wearing the silver and gold armor and helmets. Most likely 2 or more Avon guards were behind the door. This room was supposed to be impregnable as the walls were 10 feet thick. Tori was inside a prison while her husband and sons were outside dealing with whatever the Gargans devised. Your Highness, Galino bowed and set his hand on the pommel of his sword. This is just a precaution. King Mabon has decreed your safety above all. Tori clenched her fists and walked toward the commander general. He was stricken with straight black hair, and his greenish eyes that sparkled like a cut diamond. The closer she got, the smaller she got, as his stature alone could intimidate the best Avens in the arena. Are you saying because I am human, I am to be encased in this box? Sighing and shifting his weight, Galeno squeezed his sword's handle. My lady, our place is to follow the king's decree and prevent a fatality which would hinder the Avens. Well, you see, without a leader in place, people tend to lose control. Stepping back, Tori took in what he said. Galeno was here to protect her. Did he think someone would actually come after her? What about Gabriel? Would he survive what the Gargans planned? Would they have looked for him if he stayed on Ava? If she could rid her son's powers, she would. But at what price? What price did selfishness pay? She had to let destiny play out, even if it meant being out of the battle, so Ava could thrive. She turned to view Galeno's daughter and Romeo in the far corner with Willa. Steps were already being taken to secure everyone on Ava and possibly prepare volunteers for war. And if the war was here already, she glanced back at Galeno. Has Ibis returned? It's not my place to say. Your place is to comfort the queen as well. Do I not get any of your sympathy? She sat on one of the chairs in the room. Romeo raised his ears as she pointed to the ground, and Romeo came to be petted to help Tori relax. It is not a question of sympathy, my queen, but that of maintaining confidence. My role here isn't of caretaker, it's of protector. Tori placed her arm on the armchair. She formed a fist. She means to take my husband, Galeno, and I'm back here. There must be something I could do. Galeno stood at ease and raised his eyes. Ibis was my niece, which made King Mabon family. It took me a long time to realize her intentions for your mate were evil. Truly a shadow has been cast over Ava. His tone changed from serious to foreboding. This is a driving force for her. Camille says she will awaken, and we must prepare for it. He raised his arm and pointed to the wall. These walls might look sturdy, but they are of no use against a force that can shield herself with the wind. Father is right, Hermes said. She stood, and her green eyes matched the dress she wore. The scroll mentioned that the water which consumed would die as the flame. Tori gasped. The ice encasing Ibis will melt, she gulped. She took my son once and tried to take Mabon back. Who is securing the vault? That's the end of the chapter.
Thank you so much for that reading, Maria. There's clearly a lot of tension, and I think that really brought that to life. So that was a great place to leave us kind of on the edge of our seats there. Thank you for that. Yeah, reading next today is Brian Snyder. Kim is a retired tax partner of the international accounting firm Deloitte. He received his BA, MBA, and JD from the University of Washington, where he also served as an adjunct faculty member of the LLM program. Kim lives on Vashon Island, a ferry boat away from Seattle. He's an amateur poker player who enjoys the competitive aspects of the game as well. Today, we'll be hearing from Death Valley, in which if you mix time travel, high-stakes poker, and a deadly conspiracy buried in the heart of the Old West, that's how you get Death Valley. Mick Johnson thought he was returning to Death Valley to confront his past. Instead, he's drawn into a web of deals, cover-ups, and missing persons that could threaten the very future of the American Southwest. 25 years after his brother's tragic death, Mick is back in the desert seeking answers. Today, I'm actually going to be screen sharing the audio from the beginning of Death Valley. Kim has a condition which impairs his ability to speak for long periods, so instead, this will be a great opportunity for us to hear the beginning of the book as created by the narrator for the upcoming audiobook. So to continue, I'm just going to go ahead and screen share. Just give me 1 second while I get that set up. All right, here we go.
Mountain high. My parents were flower children wannabes who were grad students studying geology at Berkeley in the early 80s. They met on a university-sponsored field trip here at Death Valley. Dad convinced Mom to sneak away from the group for a picnic. They drove up into the mountains that form the western wall of Death Valley to a trailhead known as Wild Rose Canyon. Hiking a ridgeline, they found an overlook where they could see the entire valley floor, some 6,000 feet below. They smoked some pot, drank some wine, and made love under a mesquite tree. 9 months later, they were married, and I was born. Not in that order, I found out later. They commemorated their first love nest by naming me Wild Rose McDonald.
Sounds like your parents brought a whole new meaning to the term Rocky Mountain High, I observed.
Ignoring me, Rose continued on with her monologue, cathartic as it seemed to be for her. Needing a way to support themselves, they both took jobs with the national parks. Eventually, they managed to get transferred here to Death Valley, where they worked as a park ranger team for the next 30 years, raising me along the way. Mom died 2 years ago from pancreatic cancer, despite Dad's best efforts to find a miracle cure. Dad died 6 months later, officially from radon poisoning of all things. I knew there was something I was supposed to say, but all I could offer her was, "I'm sorry." "I'm okay now," Rose replied, "but thank you." Changing the subject seemed like the only safe thing to do. "So why are you patrolling this stretch of road? I mean, we are out in the middle of nowhere, aren't we?" Rose snapped out of her reverie, furtively glanced at me, and smiled. "I thought you might be interested in an insider's tour of the town of Leadfield." "Leadfield? Now there is a town in need of a new PR firm. Can I buy you a cold beer when we get there, or is that against park regulations?" The easy smile on her face told me two things. One, she was getting comfortable with me, and two, she was amused by something I had said. "As it happens, Mick, today is my day off, so a beer would taste great. Your money, however, is no good in Leadfield for reasons you will soon see. How about I let you buy me lunch at the inn at Furnace Creek instead?" "Sounds great," I replied. "It's a date." Rose hesitated. Then, laughing, she said, "I guess it is." Life was good. The washboard torture finally came to an end as we reached the base of what I assumed was the beginning of the climb up to Titus Canyon. Rose calmly pointed the Jeep straight up, or so it seemed, the side of a high canyon wall, and we soon began a steep ascent of rock-infested switchbacks that quickly gained us altitude above the valley floor below. Washouts and rock falls combined to make the condition of the track seemingly impassable with each new turn. Every switchback was an invitation to plunge to our death onto the boulders below. Trying to appear relaxed, I nonchalantly reached down to my lap to see if my seatbelt was on tight, only to find that it wasn't even fastened. I forced my right hand to let go of its death grip on the passenger door armrest and tried to think of something casual to say. As if reading my mind once again, Rose beat me to the punch. "Hold on tight, Mick. This road can get a bit technical." "What do you mean, can?" my thoughts screamed. But my mouth had not yet caught up with my brain. I was just about to respond with my best commercial pilot voice. "Folks, we are expecting a little rockiness in the next few minutes, and we may plunge to a flaming death. So check those seatbelts, and then we invite you to sit back, relax." Just then my worst fears became reality, however, as an out-of-control vehicle materialized above us on the high side of the canyon switchback we had just entered. Spewing rocks and gravel, the dark vehicle was on a head-on collision course with us. I heard a voice screaming in terror, and I realized that it was mine. Swerving to miss the oncoming juggernaut, it appeared for a split second that Rose would win the game of chicken as our Jeep hugged the outer edge of the switchback. The black vehicle roared by eastbound, clearing the Jeep by mere inches. Unfortunately, the switchback's minuscule shoulder that Rose was banking on, no pun intended, crumbled under the weight of the Jeep and began to break free. Rose struggled to hold the edge, but despite her skilled effort at the wheel, the Jeep began a slow-motion roll over the outer edge of the tight corner. Like an old-fashioned kinetoscope, I caught glimpses of time-lapse images. The canyon floor 300 feet below, then Rose hanging above me, suspended by her seatbelt, then jagged rock outcroppings, then a blue cloudless sky, and then Rose again. Then I blacked out. Chapter 10. Cliffhanger. Okay, time to wake up, I whispered to Rose very softly. Softly because her face was only inches away from mine, and softly because we were one minor weight shift away from dropping to our death. I had been awake for about 5 minutes or so, time enough to determine that my head felt like shit and that my head was the least of my worries. The Jeep had finally stopped somersaulting, coming to rest upside down. Thanks to my male ego, I had still not buckled my seatbelt when the roller coaster ride began. As a result, I was tossed around the Jeep interior like sneakers in a laundry dryer. When the cycle was finished, I was left lying on my back on the underside of the Jeep's roof, my face just inches from Rose's face. The rest of me angled toward the passenger side door and an open space where the door's window glass once existed. I took a quick inventory of my vital systems and concluded that other than small cuts and bruises, I was in remarkably good shape so far. As near as I could make out, the Jeep had fallen a short distance to a rock outcropping just below the crumbling switchback. That was the good news, good being a relative term. The really bad news was that the slightest movement by me seemed to tip our upside-down space capsule toward the shelf's edge and the great void beyond. Rose was out cold, suspended by her seatbelt inches above me, her breathing regular. I was reasonably sure she would wake up with nothing more than a nasty bump on her head, that is, unless she panicked. Any sudden motion would almost certainly cause us to make one last and fatal roll off the rock ledge. Looking at her at close range, Rose's freckled face was a picture of serenity. Her cheeks had a natural blush that did her name justice. Her mouth was slightly open as though she was amused by the crazy situation we were in. I had a sudden urge to kiss her, and I did. I'll be the first to admit that my gentle kiss on her slightly parted lips was potentially the dumbest, not to mention inappropriate thing I could have done. Rose's eyes fluttered open briefly. A faint smile crossed those beautiful lips, and then her eyes closed again as she went back to an easy slumber. Okay, beautiful, you really need to wake up, but listen to my voice as you do, I intoned a few moments later. You must stay very, very, very still. Just slowly open your eyes now and listen carefully to my voice as you do. Rose's eyes fluttered again, but this time they remained open. Alarm registered a second later, and I interjected an easy there and whoa to soothe her anxiety as she tried to look around the Jeep's cockpit. Her eyes went wide with fear, but she did as I asked and did not move. Good girl, I said. Okay, here's the deal. We are in serious trouble. By the time I finished outlining what I could make of our situation, Rose had begun to regain her wits. She spoke in a hushed voice, as if that would not disturb the equilibrium of the Jeep. Can't you crawl out the broken window? She whispered. I'm afraid it's not that simple. You are hanging a little further away from the smashed out window than I am. My weight is acting as a counterbalance to yours, keeping the Jeep from making one last roll. I think that if I were to inch my way out first, The absence of my weight may result in a net weight shift that might be all that is needed to cause the Jeep and you to go over the side. A somber Rose studied my face intently before quietly asking, "Do you have a plan B?" "As a matter of fact, I do," I said with bravado that I didn't feel. "I think that if you were to release your shoulder harness and gently lower yourself down on top of me, we should actually improve our weight distribution a bit. Then you will need to crawl over me towards the window. Once you are out of the Jeep, I should be able to worm my way out behind you." "I choose option A," she said with grim determination. "You get out. I'll take my chances." It was right then that I think I realized that I was falling for her. No pun intended. "Sorry, but I'm not leaving you behind to be some kind of ranger martyr." Her green eyes drilled into mine with blazing intensity, but then they softened into a wan smile. "Okay, Mick Johnson, we'll do it your way. But there is one more thing. Did you just kiss me a few minutes ago?" "Yes. I'm sorry, but I stammered. "Do it again," she replied. "If this is the end of the line, I would really be pissed at myself if I had never actually kissed you for real." I kissed her again, and she kissed me back. For real. Now I knew there was no turning back. Chapter 11. Liftoff. Those next few moments were alternatively sublime, surreal, and just plain scary. The sublime and surreal parts you probably already figured out. The fact that I was kissing a park ranger in an upside-down Jeep that was intent on one final roll to oblivion transcended any concept of reality. "One more thing," I whispered to Rose. "When we get out of this mess, I am still going to hold you to our lunch date." In spite of our predicament, or perhaps because of it, Rose began to softly giggle. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's do this." Slowly, I reached my hands up to Rose's shoulders. "I've got you. Now, undo your buckle slowly, then put both of your hands between us." Hearing the click of the buckle, I concentrated on taking on her weight as smoothly as I could while lowering her down the few inches that separated us. The Jeep trembled and groaned like it was trying to make up its mind as to what to do next. Fortunately, it settled back down, still considering its options. Rose's face was buried in my chest, her hands at my waist. "Okay, now both of us need to use our hands to pass you over my face and out the window. When you get outside, don't block the window. Move away from the Jeep. I may be moving fast and only have one shot to get out." We began squirming Rose over me as planned, hand over hand. The lecher in me took scarce notice of some of Rose's softer body parts that passed over my face, as survival proved to be the ultimate of basic instincts. As Rose's feet disappeared through the Jeep window, I could feel the Jeep starting to finally let go of its hold on the cliff's edge. Reaching up to the window, I grabbed the frame, as well as a few shards of glass, and desperately tried to follow Rose out the window. My right hand jerked back, lacerated by a shard of glass still in the window frame, an instinctive reaction that I instantly realized could prove fatal. As the Jeep began to roll, the window frame began to move up, and for one frantic moment, I didn't think I was going to clear the window in time. Fortunately for me, Rose had stubbornly not moved away from the Jeep as I had instructed. She was sitting at the edge of the precipice, with her heels dug into a small rock crevice, much as if she were playing a game of tug-of-war. She grabbed my non-bloody left hand with both of hers, and with the aid of her bracing grip and a final desperate lunge from me, I ejected from the Jeep capsule just as it took its maiden and final space flight. I landed hard on Rose with my legs dangling over the edge of the cliff. Trusting her grip on the rock cleft, and with no other options left besides panic, I madly scrambled up and over the rest of her, my momentum causing us both to tumble backwards in a conjoined heap, but away from danger. The muffled sound of the Jeep finding its final resting place below only barely registered with me as I lay on my back, looking up at a cloudless royal blue sky. Alive.
All right, so clearly a lot of tension in the readings today. That was a lot to really hold inside as you were listening to that. Thank you to Kim for that writing, and of course to your narrator for bringing that to life for us today. Our final reader for today's event is Phyllis Picasso. Mysteries and historical fiction are passions of Phyllis's. Her interest began with her first Nancy Drew mystery at the age of 9. Unwrapped is her second book, part of a detective series which takes place in the present day. She has a published novel, A Leaf from My Own Book, a historical fiction romance taking us back to 1936. Phyllis is a lifelong resident of New Jersey. Today we'll be hearing her read from Unwrapped, in which the protagonist is terribly frightened. Jordan's fear coincides with two murders that have recently occurred at the Township Mall, a week apart from one another. In addition to her panic, she is battling the unrelenting nausea of a first pregnancy, and as if that weren't enough to handle, her new boss just happens to be her husband's former fiance. To complicate matters yet further, the two murder victims and Cheryl were all childhood friends. Jordan no longer knows whom she can trust. We'll hear more of the story now from Phyllis herself.
Thank you. I'm going to start with the prologue and then move into a part of chapter 8. The Hedgewood Mall was packed with shoppers, which was an uplifting sight after the months of masks and seclusion. Mandy Gormley looked down at her nails and was glad she took the time to get a quick manicure at Luxuriate. The manicure was another step in her plan to take better care of herself. She thought briefly of her friend Cheryl Kingston, always a perfect manicure, even in junior high. She took another bite of her bun. This would have to be her last sweet indulgence before Christmas if she wanted to lose the 20 pounds she had gained. Jack didn't mention her weight gain, but she knew from when they were first dating that he liked very thin women. Mandy sighed. She was still in awe of the man, the fact that he could have had his pick of the girls, and yet he chose her, the plain Mandy Lunt. Well, he didn't quite choose her. She had really chosen him back in the 8th grade, when he was already handsome and she was a gawky teenager. Persistence paid off through helping him with his classes and just being around him. Every new girl he dated was a threat, but he always came back to Mandy. Funny that he had never dated Cheryl Kingston. That was why she and Cheryl had remained friends. Mandy had walked past Your Poisson and looked at the menu on the door. She longed for the day when she was 20 pounds lighter and she and Jack could have a romantic dinner celebrating their marriage anniversary. She sighed. Eating cinnamon buns wasn't going to help her closer to her goal. She was almost finished with her bun and decided to make one more stop on her way out to the car. The candle shop was always crowded, but part of her tradition included adding a new and different large candle to the mantle each year. She ate the last morsel of the cinnamon bun and grabbed up her packages. She thought she would stop in Perfume and Tea, which was just across the atrium as well. She might decide on a new perfume to wear, another sign to show Jack she cared about herself despite the weight gain. She loved the store but couldn't stand the owner, that Claire something or other. Mandy guessed Claire to be 40-something, but the woman was trim, always perfectly dressed, and appeared to be looking down her nose at those who were not. She never saw groups of young girls entering the store. Claire's demeanor was not friendly to giggling teenagers. Mandy headed for Perfume and Tea and began looking at the perfume displays. As usual, the place was flawlessly presented. The displays were more than eye-catching. She could see Claire at the back of the store, alternating between smiling at customers who looked interested in making a purchase and glaring at others. Mandy thought she saw Claire glance her way and frown. Mandy knew the look meant either she was not dressed up enough to meet Claire's approval or she had upset Claire in the past, most likely for sampling many of the fragrances and buying nothing. Claire had a reputation for remembering those things. Mandy glanced down at her coat and shooed off the remaining cinnamon bun crumbs. She hoped Claire hadn't noticed. She sprayed a few perfume samples on her wrist and decided against them and headed out of the store to the Cozy Candle shop. As Mandy approached Cozy Candle, she could see it was packed with people. Against her better judgment, she entered the fray, and after a few near encounters with other shoppers, she managed to find a spicy smelling candle, and she was pleased to see there wasn't a long line to check out. She glanced over at perfume and tea one last time as she headed out to Blaine's. That new perfume would have to wait for another time, for nothing had really caught her attention, and Claire's something with the stupid last name had made her uncomfortable. Blaine's could only be described as chaotic, and Mandy was surprised. She thought the chaos would have been confined to the opening hours, but it was 10 after 6, and the store was experiencing heavy traffic. She decided to use the door near the handbag section to walk to the car. Going through the men's department would have taken her further away from where she recalled the car was parked. The evening had turned much colder. Overcast skies had given way to a brisk wind, and steady frozen rain mixed with wet snow. She heard the tapping of the ice on the pavement as she decided to move forward. Mandy wrapped her scarf around her neck, the tails of the scarf hanging on her back. She began walking. People were waiting under the Blaine awning, assessing whether to run or take out an umbrella if they had one handy. Mandy had no umbrella and walked with her head tucked down to avoid the pelting ice and snow. She hated this time of the year, the early darkness, the chill, the eerie setting of late fall. The parking lot had remnants of the last of the fallen leaves, and they were slippery. Mandy wanted to hurry to get out of the chill, but the wet snow coupled with the leaves was making it more difficult. The parking lot needed new paving, and Mandy was surprised it hadn't been addressed before the holiday season arrived. Looking down to both protect herself from the cold, pelting rain and to watch where she was walking, she spotted a $5 bill. It must have flown out of someone's hands in their eagerness to get inside the mall. People were so careless about money. She bent down to pick it up and stuffed it in her coat pocket. The walk was getting more annoying. When Mandy had arrived in the mid-afternoon, she was forced to park in one of the last spaces in the B3 lot. Her car was in a diagonal line from the door she had chosen to exit from. She had been happy to get something in the Blaine wing, even if she did have to walk a distance. Now, with the chill, wind, rain, and laden down with packages, she regretted her earlier decision to wait till mid-afternoon and risk parking in no man's land or on a grassy hill where several cars had parked. Oddly enough, there wasn't much activity in this section of the parking lot. People must be shopping late into the evening. That was the only thing she could think of, for the lack of cars moving in and out of the service road. She rubbed her nose and face as splashes of sleet, rain, and wet snow hit her. She could hear the tapping against the macadam and hoped the roads were not icy. She was lucky to know the mall so well to head exactly for her car without having to keep looking up. The lights in this section of the parking lot had somehow either gone out or had not been activated. She would call mall security when she got settled. Walking as fast as she could, she thought she heard footsteps behind her. A quick glance behind her revealed someone that she thought was familiar. Someone who had arrived around the same time, who had a parking space way in the distance. Odd, someone with a distant parking spot leaving at the same time, heading to almost the same group of cars. The person behind was keeping the same tempo as Mandy, most likely trying to avoid the icy raindrops. She was getting closer now, and with fob in hand, she pressed hard to produce lights for her car. Thank God she was almost inside. She began putting the packages in the back seat, holding onto the thought that she would be in a warm car on her way home soon. She bent down to arrange one of the packages and held on to the warming thought, even as her scarf was being pulled tighter around her neck. She frantically tried to grab the hands pulling, but the other had the strength. She fought but could feel herself slipping out of consciousness. Her last thought was she wouldn't see the kids open the presents that were now carefully lined up in the back of the car. That's it.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. Again, we're just getting so much of character and building. So this has been really a fantastic collection so far. So at this time, we have time for our audience Q&A. So I'm seeing that questions are already being put in the chat. So feel free to keep putting questions in there. And we're just going to get right into it. This first question is for Maria. Do you already have ideas for beyond book 3 in this series? And what led you to have the titles with the word wing in it?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely. The question is, do you already have ideas for where to go beyond book 3? And what led you to use the titles with the word wing?
That's what I thought you said. No, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
For the Wing series, I actually don't have a continuation after this third book. It's kind of more of a culmination of everything that's happened, but it's still left open. I might change my mind in the future, but at the moment, I'm actually working on a different fantasy novel.
Okay.
And for the Wing and the books, I think it just all stems back from when I first started writing my drafts. And the title, I already had the title that I wanted with the wing in it. It just kind of, I guess because I was dealing a lot with angels and praying because my sister was going through chemo. So I think I just started getting those images more. And I thought, hey, what can I do with it? And that's how it started.
Yeah, you know, when inspiration strikes and you listen to it, I think that can really create something very organic feeling. And a very exciting to hear there is a slightly different but still exciting project on the horizon.
Yeah.
This next question is for Kim. Did you model Mick after anyone you know or after a particular celebrity? And does the illustration on the cover match your image of how you envisioned the two-headed coin?
Yeah, I modeled after myself probably more than anything, but the driving story is a result of two coins that when they touch each other they create a reaction, a time reaction, and so I love the book cover. I've got a lot of people have commented on it. You'll see that the cover has two coins, and at one point when those coins come to touch each other in the story, a time explosion happens, and that's the vehicle of the book.
Yeah, so it sounds like, you know, that artistic vision is really leaping off the cover, so to speak, to bring that vision to life. And I totally understand that kind of the inspiration coming from your personhood, you know, and infusing that into your characters. I think a lot of writers can relate to that. For Phyllis, another question coming in, what book ideas do you have next or future projects thinking on?
I have two future projects, a mystery in this series with the same detective, Bob Drake, and that mystery is completed. And I have a sequel to the book, A Leaf from My Own Book, that takes us from 1940 on to the end of World War II. So two projects, one complete and one really in the research stage.
Right. So definitely, you know, different stages, and it obviously takes its time, but some things to look forward to, which is very exciting. This question is for all three authors now. The question is, was there a particular scene or chapter that was especially interesting to write? I'm thinking we can go in reading order again. So Maria, do you want to start us off with this one?
Sure. There are various chapters that I loved to write. One particular character that I have is also another human. There's not that many humans, but this particular is a human. His name is Gabriel, and he undergoes a lot of struggles, and the Gargans wanting to manipulate him, and his family got killed pretty much, and he's alone. He's also one that fell in love with the king's daughter, and that causes a lot of tension and things. And the chapter that I love to write was the one where he actually gets used to fighting alongside the Avens against the Gargans, and he can stand on his own even though he doesn't have any magic or his strength is not up to par with any of them. So I feel like I like writing scenes where he has to give it his all.
Yeah, there's something about ultimate exertion, which can be so fun to write. So I totally see where you're coming from on that. Kim, what about you? Is there a particular scene or chapter that was especially interesting for you to write?
Well, the time travel aspect is the complication. I've developed a philosophy now: never write a time travel book because it takes a lot of energy to mesh inherently ridiculous concepts into something that's believable, like time travel.
Cautionary tale, it kind of sounds like.
So the mechanics of that absorbed a lot of my energy, and when I started writing this book, I wanted to write a book that somebody could buy at an airport on the way to travel somewhere. That's an airport book. Something that you would pick up, enjoy it, and so that's inspiration.
Yeah, so kind of related themes there, the time travel, this literal travel that the readers are doing, going hand in hand. Phyllis, what about you? Was there a particular scene or chapter you found to be especially interesting to write?
Yes. The chapter where Jordan, our protagonist, meets up with her new boss, Cheryl Kingston, who I mentioned in the reading, realizing Cheryl is the former fiance of her husband, realizing this woman is going to be responsible for her reviews, realizing that she could, if she holds it against her, deter her career, and also what Cheryl's reaction was. You get the feeling that Cheryl's not too happy about this, and she pretty much going to have to play it fairly, but she doesn't really know if she's going to be able to. Having worked in two large corporations, I I wrote about what I knew, and that was one of the things I knew. Competition. Sometimes your boss isn't exactly who you want them to be. Sometimes it's awkward. And so that chapter was easy for me to write and I found somewhat interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like, there's just these elements that can be really fun to explore as you're writing, which I know that's a feeling many writers can share in. We have one more question coming in again for all three authors. Was there a part of the writing process that really surprised you? Going in reverse order, Phyllis, do you want to start us off this time?
Yes, I can say what surprised me was that going back to edit your work, you're reading what you think it should be. And I found in reviewing first iteration, second, even third, there are mistakes that I didn't pick up that I'm wondering, well, why didn't I pick that up? So the editing process, I find, even though it might be boring, it is just so very, very important.
Lost the mute button for a second there. Yeah, I know that really can take you by surprise. It can be something that you kind of have to overcome
Mhm.
sometimes. Kim, what about you? What kind of, or what part of the writing process ended up surprising you?
I wanted to have a cameo appearance from historic figures. So my book has a influence by Wyatt Earp, Tom Mix,
Mhm.
Death Valley Scotty, all make appearances in my book, and their story is took a life of its own. So I enjoyed meeting these characters as I wrote the book.
Yeah, that's something I hear all
Mhm.
the time is these characters will really just develop a mind of their
Mhm.
own, which I think is such a great testament to the quality of character creation on the writer's part. So I'm glad to hear another tale of that. And Maria, closing us out, what have you found to be a surprising part of the writing process?
Um, just to echo Kim, that yes, the characters have a mind of their own, and they take you to places you sometimes don't want to go, and sometimes it's too dark, and sometimes it's a little light. In this particular third book, a character that I developed ended up dying, and I didn't see that coming. I didn't want to write it that he was dying, but at the same time, it was, I think, it actually made the scene much more uh, stressful for the Avens that were fighting against the Guardians at that moment, and what it meant for the Avens. So I found it very interesting what happened myself.
Mhm.
Yeah, again, I think that's a really big testament to how these characters, how these stories really come to life because the fact that that was a painful process for you and not one that you had anticipated is such a huge,
Mhm.
um, I mean, yeah, the story just comes to life. Like I said, it really takes
Mhm.
a mind of its own. So I think that's really just a beautiful sentiment. Despite, obviously that's a challenge losing a character like that.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, I just want to say now, thank you. I want to say to all of our authors, thank you. And it was always so wonderful to hear these books come to life in the voices of their creators or their audiobook narrators. So thank you so much to Maria, Kim, and Phyllis for being generous with your time, your words, your thoughts in this Q&A. I think there were a lot of great insights that we heard. Thank you also to everyone in the audience for joining us to celebrate these authors together. Of course, I want to remind you that you can order Wing Rebel, Death Valley, and Unwrapped from the links in the chat. I'm actually
Mhm.
going to put all three of those links in there one more time for you so you can easily access them there. In the meantime, please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and just let us know that you attended today's event. We'll look forward to hearing from you, but until then, that's the rest, or that's the end of today's event. So have a great rest of or actually, it's Friday. Have a great weekend, everyone.